All right, guys, so we talked about a little bit about the origins of the Chesapeake with Virginia and Maryland. Now we're going to go a little bit into the actual society, the economy, the religion, the social aspects of these colonies after their founding. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the religion of the Chesapeake colonies. Now, you got to remember, as you're going through and as you're studying this, you've got to do this more or less comparatively, okay? So everything that you look at, you got to think about what was it like in the New England colonies, particularly Massachusetts Bay. So as far as the religion of the Chesapeake colonies, it's going to be predominantly Anglican or Church of England or Congregationalist is another way to put it, which is going to be a little bit different than what we see in the New England colonies where they're more or less Puritan or they're, all Puritan at the first. So the religion in the Chesapeake colonies is going to be a little bit less demanding. It's going to be more based on ritual. It's going to be a little bit closer to Catholicism than the Puritanism that we'll study in the next section. There's going to be a lot of stressing of the goodness of God and benevolence and things like that, which once again you need to think about comparatively to the Northeast. Next on the list is going to be the economy of the Chesapeake. Now remember, it's based on plantation agriculture, okay? So the economy is going to be completely based around a couple of certain staple crops like tobacco, rice, and things like that. Also, there's going to be a little bit of industry outside of that. There's going to be some logging of pine trees, particularly in the Carolinas. Out of that, you're going to get lumber and tar and other products that can be used by the British Navy when it comes to shipbuilding and ship maintenance. And the big labor force, or the types of labor found in Chesapeake, is at first going to be indentured servitude, which we'll talk about in a second. And then as we go forward, it's going to be a shift to Atlantic slavery. As far as the society goes, I talked about this a little bit in the last one, but it's going to be very what's called stratified. There's going to be a big difference between top and bottom, and it's also going to be a very strict separation as you go down the social hierarchy. As I said in the last one, a majority of the social, economic, cultural aspects are going to be controlled by what's called the planter aristocracy or the large plantation owners. And also, comparatively to other colonies, there's going to be a lot more racial prejudice in the facts of how they view Africans, in particular African slaves. So as we go forward, the one defining characteristic that is going to mark Southern society or the Chesapeake society is going to be tobacco. This is what saved Jamestown. This is what kept the colonies going and what made them prosper through a period where it could have went either way. Uh, Virginia was known as a colony built on smoke, which is kind of funny because the King of England at the time completely hated smoking, but once he saw those checks coming in and realized how much revenue came into the crown, from tobacco, he was pretty much willing to put that moral or societal objection aside and just roll with it. It became the cornerstone of Virginia economy. They planted this stuff everywhere. It led to expansion in the forms of claiming new lands to be able to plant this crop, stuff like that. And it also ties into the labor systems that we'll talk about. All right, so now we're going to roll into the labor systems, most specifically indentured servitude, and what you need to think about as we go through this, or what are the basic characteristics of it, and how did the events that come out of indentured servitude, how did that eventually lead to Atlantic slavery? All right, so before we get into the actual characteristics of indentured servitude, we got to figure out what led to it, and what led to it is the fact that tobacco is a very labor-intensive, very time-consuming crop. You've got to have a lot of people. Like the number of people you've got to have per acre of tobacco is larger than a lot of crops. So you got to have people to work it. And the problem is they can't find the people to work this land in the Chesapeake. For reason number one, there's a lot of the settlers are just males. So the birth rate and the survival rate for children is not enough to keep replenishing a consistent labor supply. Also, at the beginning, they attempted to try natives as a labor force, but it didn't work. Because of the climate and the harshness of the work, Indians or natives were dying too quickly, so it wasn't worth the trouble to be able to do this. So they began to look to African slavery, but at this time, Africans were considered too expensive. It was too much of an investment. There wouldn't be enough return on it for them to make the profits that they were looking for. The question is, what are you going to do? Well, what they end up doing is they look to England and a lot of dispossessed young men who are looking for opportunity and a chance to get out of England. So the popularization of indentured servitude really comes about through something called the Headright System. And the Headright System is kind of the process of how indentured servants, or in the case of most people, young single men, end up coming to the New World. And the way it worked is that landowners had an opportunity to kind of win-win in this situation. First of all, they would get workers to come over to work their lands, and also they would receive land for what they did. And what they did is they would pay for the passage or pay for the voyage of someone from England to come over to the New World. And once that happened, that person, as we'll talk about in a second, will be required to work for them. Well, in addition to that, they also picked up 50 acres of land. So if you're a landowner at this time, this is a no-lose situation for you in the fact that you're getting both labor and land, basically for just paying for somebody to get on a boat and come to the New World. From the indentured servant's point of view, here's how this worked. Once you signed on for this free trip to the New World, you signed a contract paper, whatever you want to call it, that basically said you're going to work for this person for 5 to 7 years and provide them labor on their plantation in return for this voyage. So because of that, it was a lot of people who were looking for opportunity, who were looking to get out of England and start a new life. So you get a lot of young, unmarried men in their late teens and early 20s coming over to sign these contracts. Now there were women as well, just not anywhere on the scale of the men that were coming over. When they came over, they were treated as property. They were tied to the land. They signed this binding contract that said they were going to do this. So you begin to see some exploitation with these workers once time goes on, as far as them not getting what they agreed to get once they were done with their terms of service, kind of ending up in a perpetual cycle of indentured servitude, even though they technically weren't that anymore. And from their point of view, it didn't really work out as well as they had hoped when they got on the boat in England. So what comes out of this eventually is once these indentured servants were done, they're trying to scratch out a living. They're not getting the best land. They don't have the most opportunity. Things are not going well with them. Plus, when you combine that with the fact that they're getting kind of pushed out to the western edge of the colony and are coming into contact with natives on a more frequent basis than people who were more towards the coast, it's inevitable that some kind of conflict is going to break out. And what it comes down to, we're talking about Bacon's Rebellion here, which has more to do with the fight of indentured servants versus the upper class of Virginia, but it's stemming out of that conflict with natives because a lot of these indentured servants ask for, or former indentured servants are asking for help to fight against the natives. The way it's going is they're kind of running guerrilla warfare against each other out on the frontier. Like indentured servants will get attacked by natives who would come in and try to be like, okay, we want to make peace, whatever it is. And then they would attack them, and in return, they would go out and do hit and run attacks on settlements. So there's a lot of conflict going on, and these guys who are living kind of on the edges of Virginia need help. So these former indentured servants from this conflict with the natives go and ask for help from Governor William Berkeley of Virginia, who is a governor who's in power, and basically he refuses to help them. And there's a couple of reasons why he refuses. Number one, he's got a pretty lucrative trade going with the Indians, and he doesn't want to put that in jeopardy by it appearing that he's backing these white settlers. Also, Berkeley doesn't really like the way that they're going out and doing a land grab on the frontiers of Virginia. He's more a proponent of gradual expansion. You kind of just get a little bit at a time versus going out and just taking it. And also, he has a good thing going. Like I said, like he fears his loss of power in Indian relations. He doesn't want to lose that position he's in. So, for more or less selfish reasons, he's refusing to help these guys. So here's kind of how this goes down. All right, the rebellion is going to be led by a guy named Nathaniel Bacon, who ironically is a member of the upper class himself, but for whatever reason, he has decided he's going to take this side of trying to fight natives and kind of eliminate them and help white settlers get land. So the heads of the two sides are Nathaniel Bacon and Berkeley. All right, so Berkeley basically tells them, quit attacking Indians, okay, for the reasons that we spoke about a while ago. Well, Bacon defies his order and goes on out and begins attacking them out on the, I guess you could call it, frontier. Well, when that happens, Berkeley doesn't take too kindly to that, and he charges Bacon with treason, which is a very serious offense in colonial times and even today. In response to that, Bacon and his boys roll into Jamestown and they kick Berkeley out, and then after that they burn Jamestown to the ground. Well, in the midst of all this, as things are kind of coming to a head, Bacon dies of dysentery and things begin to calm down. Berkeley comes in, the rebellion crumbles, and they basically just break it up. They execute a couple of people and all that kind of stuff. So as far as it being a rebellion on a wide scale basis and being a huge thing, it's not really that big of a deal. The big deal is going to come back with the effects of Bacon's Rebellion and what comes out of that. And what comes out of this is that big time landowners in Virginia go, holy crap, man, we can't have these settlers attacking us. Like, indentured servants are no longer a stable workforce. Like, they're disgruntled, they're a threat. We need a more peaceful, more coercive type of labor. And what they do is they then begin looking to Africa. And out of Bacon's Rebellion, and this is the most important thing to learn out of this, Bacon's Rebellion is the key impetus for Atlantic slavery beginning on a wide-scale basis in the colonies, and it's simply because white landowners realized that Indentured servants were too volatile. They couldn't be controlled enough. They're not docile enough. So they look for somewhere where they can have more control over their labor force. All right, that is, I will grant you, not the best wrap up I've ever done there. But that wraps up Chesapeake Society. We'll talk about some more in-depth stuff in class. But remember, these online lectures are just basic talking points, hit points for you to use when you're studying. In the next one, we're going to row up north and go to Massachusetts Bay and talk about the Puritans and all that good stuff.